Hello and welcome to the Better Health Worksite program sponsored by the Human Resources Department with the City of Albuquerque. My name is Lisa McNichol Gatan and I'm the Better Health Worksite program coordinator. And our mission is to reduce chronic conditions associated with poor nutrition, inadequate levels of physical activity, and tobacco use. And today we're going to talk about nutrition, and our topic is the Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2010. And my hope for our program today is that you will come away with some resources that you can find, and we hope that you will also learn a few new things from the program about nutrition. And we have two registered dietitians. They are also licensed dietitians and have earned master's degrees in nutrition. To my right is Jennie McCary, and Jennie is the Senior Clinical Project Coordinator with Presbyterian Healthy Advantage. She has been working with Presbyterian for a few years, and prior to this role, she was the Wellness Manager with Albuquerque Public Schools. So Jennie, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa.
Also, we have registered dietitian Kristen Crosby, and Kristen is a wellness coach with the Solutions Group. And prior to her employment there, she worked as a clinical dietitian for many years. So Kristen, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
I want to start off just by pointing out the 5 key points from these National Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and then we'll get into detail on all of the points. But the 5 key topics are caloric balance, food and food components to increase, food and food components to reduce, establishing a healthy eating pattern, as well as making healthy choices. So let's start with just a little bit of history about the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. And Kristen, would you please tell us which national agencies develop the guidelines and how often are they published?
Sure. The guidelines are updated and revised every 5 years, and they're done jointly through the USDA, or U.S. Department of Agriculture, and U.S. Department of Health and Human Services work jointly to publish them.
Okay. And is there an advisory committee that's pulled together?
Yes, when they set out to revise the guidelines every 5 years, they pull experts from the field to develop the new updated guidelines or revise the current guidelines to be the new guidelines.
Okay, so we've got scientific experts on this panel. I mean, and these are people that are well known in the research community in the area of nutrition. So it's not just a bunch of bureaucrats putting these guidelines together.
No, they're experts in the field, both medical, doctors, dietitians, research.
Really influential people in
Yes.
the field and in the nation, right? I mean, some
Yes.
of our nutrition leaders in the nation putting together these guidelines.
So they're evidence-based guidelines, definitely, based on research and proven research of what's effective for health.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, let's talk about the first component of caloric balance. So, Jennie, would you describe the National Dietary Guidelines to achieve and maintain a healthy weight?
Sure. So the 2010 dietary guidelines are actually the first set of guidelines that address an unhealthy population. So overweight and obesity are epidemic, and more than 1/3 of U.S. adults and 17% of children and adolescents are considered obese. And we have local data. So 2011 self-reported data here in New Mexico revealed that 60% of U.S. adults and about 29% of children and adolescents are considered either overweight or obese. So it's really concerning. There's a number of health problems associated with being overweight or obese, including heart disease and high blood pressure, and a number of cancers, type 2 diabetes as well. And those health problems are not limited to adults. We see them in kids as well. So the dietary guidelines really focused on this. And one of the main overarching messages of the guidelines is to maintain calorie balance while making smart food choices and in an effort to achieve and sustain a healthy weight.
Okay.
So we know that, to lose weight, the solid foundation of weight management is eating fewer calories and burning more calories through physical activity. That's for anybody that would like to lose weight. And the main message of the guidelines is to enjoy food, but eat less,
Nice.
which is a good message.
That's a very nice message. It's not, food is not taboo, of course. I mean, we should be enjoying it. We get to eat so many times a day, and there's so many great choices.
Yeah, and food should be pleasurable. We just need to become more aware of how much food we're putting in our mouths and make an effort to control portions.
Okay. And with the Better Health Worksite program, you led our Way to Wellness class for our employees, and I just heard feedback from one of them, and she just said she learned so much about weight management from that class, and I'm sure you pulled so much information from these dietary guidelines and taught it to our employees.
Absolutely. As Kristen said, the guidelines are evidence-based, so they serve as a really good resource for dietitians and other health practitioners, as well as policymakers to refer to design programs. So
Okay.
yeah, I was happy to implement that with the
Nice.
city.
Well, thanks for doing that. Well, let's talk about one of the other main tenets of the guidelines, and that is, Kristen, what foods should we eat more of and why?
So the dietary guidelines break that into categories for us, and there's 4 or 5 main areas of focus to increase intake or slightly change the way we're eating currently.
Okay.
The first one is to increase our fruit and vegetable intake. The guidelines really support having at least half of your plate or half of your meals be fruit and vegetable based. And so that's probably one of the biggest areas that these guidelines support. The second one is whole grains, increasing whole grains and specifically replacing refined grains. Encouragement to have at least half of our grains be whole grain sources. The third is low fat or fat-free dairy products,
Okay.
including that in most meals, at least 2 servings a day, usually around 3, and really pushing more towards fat-free or at least reduced fat dairy sources, either skim milk, yogurt, cheese, any type of dairy. Definitely falls into that category. And the fourth major category is seafood, or lean protein in general, but particularly increasing seafood choices to be at least once or twice a week, but including all sources of lean protein, lean meats, poultry, beans, peas, unsalted nuts and seeds as well. And then there's 4 key nutrients that kind of encompass those target areas look for, particularly potassium, making sure to get enough potassium, which is mostly through fruits and vegetable choices. Calcium, which is again from our low-fat dairy choices mainly, and some of our fruits and vegetables as well are great sources of calcium. And then getting enough dietary fiber is the third main nutrient of concern, which switching to whole grains would be quite beneficial. Having whole grains provide more fiber than unrefined grain choices. And the fourth nutrient that the guidelines specifically point out is vitamin D. Making sure to get enough vitamin D from both dairy sources and seafood are the best sources of vitamin D.
I see. Okay. And along the line of the whole wheat, whole grain products, I mean, they're so delicious.
Yes.
In their whole form. I really love them. So we can enjoy our food, but just eat a little less of it to maintain that caloric balance. Okay, so which foods should we strive to reduce and why?
Yeah. So again, the guidelines for the first time really focused on disease prevention, chronic disease prevention, and spoke to Americans that were at high risk for disease. So most of the foods to reduce speak something along that. And the main one is sodium. Really looking at the amount of sodium that we're eating, and they gave specific milligram recommendations, 2,300 milligrams for the general population, and anyone at risk or currently have different disease states, including hypertension, diabetes, older Americans over 51, anyone with chronic kidney disease should really be more conservative around 1,500 milligrams of sodium. The second one is solid fats. And that, of course, is for overall weight and calorie restriction, but also important for cardiovascular disease. Really watching the amount of solid fats that we get and trying to reduce that as much as possible. And they speak specifically about the types of fats, saturated fats and trans fats specifically, with how much we should be getting, mostly avoiding trans fats whenever possible, which come mostly from processed foods like cakes and pastries, and then solid fats from our protein choices, but also added into foods.
Okay.
And then, of course, cholesterol is important as well, keeping the overall cholesterol, which kind of falls in the category of solid fats as well. And then, of course, they talk specifically about watching the amount of calories that you get, but specifically looking at the calories from added sugar and added solid fats, really reducing the amount of added sugar that we take in during days from all foods, both pastries and beverages specifically is where we get most of our added calories, or from sugar. And then, of course, refined grains. So along with increasing whole grains, reducing those refined grains. So replacing things that have been refined or the outside of the grain that's been removed or processed to be quick cooking. Those are all types of refined grains we find quite commonly in the American diet. So really focusing on getting more whole grain sources, both of commercial products and just plain whole grains, like whole grain rice, wild rice, brown rice, or whole grains like quinoa, farro, things like that. And then the last nutrient or category for reduction is alcohol, watching our added sugar from alcohol as well as extra calories from alcohol sources.
Okay. And along the trans fat line, is the thing that we look for on the labels hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated?
Yes. So if a product is less than 0.5 grams of trans fats per serving, manufacturers are not required to label it. They can say 0 if it's less than 0.5 grams per serving. So reading the ingredient label is important to look for those trans fats. Partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated oils in the ingredient list means that there are trans fats, maybe not quite high enough to be listed on the label.
Okay.
But trans fats are required to be listed on the nutrient fact panel. So
Okay.
if it's higher than 0.5 grams, it will be listed for sure.
Okay, well, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, well, looking at the category of building healthier eating patterns, the guidelines suggest eating more nutrient-dense food and less energy-dense food. So, Jenny, could you describe what this means?
Yeah, happy to. So a healthy eating pattern would consider those foods to reduce and try to focus on eating less of those foods and then eating more from the foods that Kristen described in the eat more category. So the eating less category would be those foods that are calorie dense. So Americans, generally speaking, eat far too many calories for the most part. And so these are mainly foods that are energy dense, meaning they have a lot of calories packed in a certain amount of that food. So animal fats, anything with a lot of fat is going to be more calorie dense, but animal fats in particular with the saturated fat, so like things like cheeses, ice cream, those are going to be energy dense foods. Pizza, also foods with added sugars, so like soft drinks, would be energy dense. So you get a lot of calories for a small amount of liquid. So those are energy dense. On the flip side, the dietary guidelines recommend nutrient dense foods, or what I like to call nutrient rich foods.
Okay. Oh, good.
And so these are foods that pack in a lot of vitamins and minerals, but bite for bite, you're taking in fewer calories. The other reason I really like this message of nutrient-rich foods and eating more of those is because it shifts typical nutrition recommendations that are more restrictive sounding, like eat less of this food, eat this, not that. And nutrient-rich really focuses on and encourages people to focus on the wonderful, delicious foods that are available that are very nutritious. So it's a positive message rather than a restrictive message.
So it's what to eat. And if we can stay focused on that positive, we can look for that a little bit more than what are we going to avoid. I mean, we're going to look for that too, but if we have the message in our minds of look for nutrient-rich foods, when you're looking at vegetables and fruits and other sources, and that is a nice positive message. I like that, and it's not confusing at all with the nutrient density, I just think that term isn't very well understood.
Right.
So I like how you turn that around.
Yeah, more nutrient rich. And for some people that requires a shift in mindset. They're used to approaching food as like punishment, like I can't eat this, I can only eat a certain amount of this. So it requires that shift, and it's great because then people approach food more as a benefit that they're giving to themselves, to their health, rather than giving something up.
And nourish all their cells.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the recommendation along a healthier eating pattern for eating more of a plant-based diet? And I'll ask Jenny that. I know that in the Way to Wellness class you talk about plant-based diets.
I do, yes. There's strong evidence that a plant-based diet is really the way to go for most people as far as disease prevention, overall health promotion, helping to manage things like hypertension and diabetes and heart disease. So I do like to encourage people to think about eating more plants. And eating more like whole foods. So naturally occurring carbohydrates and proteins and fats by choosing foods that aren't in a package. So as far as shifting to a plant-based diet, I suggest to people to start by taking a look at their plate.
Okay.
So I have a prop here. So this is actually a really great tool, the My Plate, or a balanced plate. Really simple tool, and it's good because we use a plate every day. So simply visualize your plate and divide it in half.
Okay.
And you want to aim to fill half of your plate with fruits and vegetables, and ideally colorful fruits and vegetables, because it's those pigments that are going to provide those antioxidants for disease prevention. And then the other half of your plate you would want to split and fill a quarter of it with a whole grain source, such as brown rice or oats or quinoa, like Kristen mentioned, buckwheat, or even a corn tortilla. And then a quarter of your plate with a protein source. And that protein can come from an animal, such as seafood or an egg, or the protein can come from plants, such as beans or tofu or another soy-based food. So it's a really simple tool that encourages people to start focusing on that. So just as an example, this would be a great balanced plate. So visualizing, and actually I'll swap these. So it follows the message here.
Okay.
Half the plate is full of fruits and vegetables, and then you can see the portion of a grain is just filling a quarter of your plate. So not half of the plate of rice, but you have a quarter of the plate of rice, and then a nice source of omega-3 fats with the seafood here. So that's a great example.
I thought that was an oatmeal cookie.
This one?
This one.
Oh, this one. If it was an oatmeal cookie, it would probably be half that size.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So really focusing on fruits and vegetables is a good place to start in shifting to a more plant-based diet. Because of the fiber, they're going to be very filling. So if you're trying to reduce calories, it's good to go for these foods that are going to fill you up because they're going to be more satisfying. Then I like to encourage people to think about their favorite recipes or their favorite meals and how they can modify it to include more plants. So for example, the enchiladas. What can you do to enchiladas to add more plants to that? You might be able to reduce the amount of meat or cheese and add spinach or squash instead.
Okay.
Or maybe if someone's ready, they might want to join that Meatless Monday bandwagon.
Yes.
And choose one day a week or Mondays to go meatless.
Okay.
So kind of being inspired by local foods at the growers market, or a new fun vegetarian recipe online.
There's a lot of good tools to incorporate a plant-based diet, and gradually, if you're not used to doing that, it's probably a nice strategy. Okay, those are great suggestions and great visuals. I'm glad you brought those on the show. I hear we have a few more coming.
We do.
So,
Surprises.
shall we talk about building a healthy eating pattern around beverages,
Sure.
Kristen?
So again, beverages, the focus really is calorie-free beverages whenever possible. And when you do choose beverages with calories, you want to choose a nutrient-dense source. For instance, skim milk or fat-free milk is going to have a lot of rich vitamins and minerals, as well as calcium and protein. So getting a lot of that for the calories you're spending on that milk if you're going to have calories in your beverage.
Okay.
But particularly watching the amount of sugar that you have in added foods and beverages is probably one of the main focuses when we look for reducing added sugars. We have a nice demonstration here of iced tea.
Okay.
I think when people look at sugar-sweetened beverages, most people know soda is not a good choice. And in general, a 12-ounce soda is going to have about 10 teaspoons of sugar in it. And we encourage calorie-free beverages, and maybe you don't want to plain water regularly. You want to spice up your beverage a little bit. And iced tea can be a great choice. However, paying attention to what's actually in the beverage that you're choosing if you're not making it yourself can be important. For instance, this brisk iced tea here has about 22 teaspoons of sugar, so quite a lot. And when we compare that to the recommendations, the American Heart Association gives us real clear guidelines for the amount of sugar that we should be having in a day. For instance, they recommend just half of,
That's
quite
a
a lot.
lot.
Yeah.
In that beverage, in that 1 liter
Just
beverage.
in that beverage, yeah. So thinking you're making a smart choice in iced tea, you can be getting a lot of added sugar in there.
So imagine an eating pattern of this daily, 1 or 2. That's a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a 12-ounce soda, typical 12-ounce regular soda is about half that, but it's also, I think that's about 24, 32 ounces.
Yeah, there's 4 servings in this bottle
Okay.
of tea.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would drink the whole
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, in comparison to recommendations, the American Heart Association recommends that you get half of your discretionary calories from added sugar. So for most typical women, that would be about 100 calories a day or about 6 teaspoons, or roughly about 24 grams of sugar. So if you're looking at a food label, that's a little bit of guidance. For a man, it'd be about 150 calories or 9 teaspoons of sugar. So just drinking this iced tea beverage would be more than double for both men and women of their daily allotted of extra sugar calories, assuming you have no other pastries or, candy or desserts that day. Just in an afternoon's refreshment of iced tea, you're getting well more than the added sugar that you need.
Well, this is an excellent example to really show, and here you're saying, women don't need any more than 6 cubes,
Yes.
6 teaspoons. I mean, no more than that.
Right.
It's not saying have 6, but up to 6. And you're saying for men, it's 9?
9.
Out of that.
Yeah, all that excess for both men and women in just one beverage.
And it adds up quickly and contributing to the overweight and obesity issue that we were talking about earlier.
It does, yeah. If you're drinking sweet drinks, it's really easy to get a lot of sugar.
Okay. Well, let's talk about food safety, because the dietary guidelines include that as part of the building a healthy eating pattern. We need to practice good safety around food. So, Kristen, will you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and of course, this time of year is even more important. It's getting warmer outside, and so keeping food at a safe temperature is important. A lot of celebrations around this time of year with graduations, and definitely a time to celebrate. So food safety really focuses around keeping food out of the danger zone, is what we call it, or keeping cold foods lower than 40 degrees and warm foods higher than 140 degrees. And between those two numbers is really where bacteria thrive. So food safety is really managing bacterial growth to keep it at a minimum, if anything. And it's really 4 different categories. Cleaning food, both cleaning your hands and surfaces and the utensils that you use so they're free of bacteria.
Okay.
Separating your food, so you keep raw unprepared food away from prepared food or vegetables or fruits that aren't going to be prepared and eaten raw. You definitely want to keep them away from foods that contain bacteria like raw meats and eggs, shellfish type things. Cooking food to a proper temperature as measured by an internal thermometer, and then chilling food properly, which also encompasses if food is left at room temperature longer than 2 hours, you want to discard that food after that 2-hour mark. So keeping food at room temperature for a little bit of time is fine, but after 2 hours, it's likely unsafe to be reconsumed. So, and of course, reheating food back up to a safe internal temperature as well.
Okay. Well, the guidelines talk about the role of environment and how it influences our health choices. We're going to skip over that part, but I'd like to wrap up the program with each of you sharing real briefly one of your favorite tools that our audience can find out there to help them implement
So
the
the plate
guidelines.
that Jenny showed, the My Plate guideline, I think is a really great tool. It's a visual, as Jenny said, you eat everything on a plate. So it's a nice, quick and easy visual tool to analyze your food and decide whether or not you've made a choice that you want to continue, or even as you're going into something, plan your food choices according to the plate, and taking anything from a restaurant food or point of service food to the food you cook at home, and just kind of adjusting it slightly to make it a little bit more plant-based friendly and My Plate friendly. And the website that goes along with that is choosemyplate.gov.
Okay, perfect.
And they have a lot of resources on there to help you with recipes and ideas of how to make your plate more friendly for you if you have different health conditions. There's a series of 10 tips that talk about lowering your sodium, or if you really struggle with fruits and vegetables, ideas on adding fruits and vegetables, and just a lot of resources on that website.
So choosemyplate.gov.
Choosemyplate.gov,
Okay, and
yep.
Jenny?
Yeah, and also on that website is the Super Tracker,
Yes,
where individuals
definitely.
can go and log their food intake and also their physical activity, and actually set goals on there too, and it'll monitor progress. So for someone that needs to monitor that and see something visually, that's a nice tool as well.
And Super Tracker will actually give you a calorie recommendation. So we talked about keeping your calories under control, and really achieving and maintaining a healthy weight is one of the main guidelines through the dietary guidelines. And Choose My Plate will give you some guidance on what calories mean for you, and kind of break it down into food choices as well.
Okay. I'm not sure if we have time to share the last one. Jenny, if you could be real quick.
Sure.
Let's see what your recommendation
Okay.
is.
Well, these plates are available, so if anyone's interested in a divided plate, this one in particular is from greentoys.com. I like to offer some tools that get people back in the kitchen, and so whether it's like a good set of knives, but these are great and make a nice gift, and these are measuring cups. So we talked a lot about controlling portions, but it can be kind of boring to pull out your old measuring cups used for baking. So these are actually vegetables that are measuring cups. So we have a 1/4 cup here, a 1/3 cup, a 1/2 cup, and one. And they're just really nice dishes to put on your counter. And when you're not quite sure if you should be eating that much food, it's nice to pull out a cup and
so we
see
can
how much you're
maintain
eating.
our caloric balance with those. Well, thank you very much for this really valuable information, practical tips that the viewers can take away. I would just recommend, if you can find the dietary guidelines online, print them, study them, focus on an area that you might need to improve, and you could really learn a lot because they're very well written and very easy to read. So thank you again for sharing today, and thank you for listening, and look forward to the next time we get to meet. Until then, be well.